Senator Harris, thank you so much for sitting down and welcoming us to your alma mater,
yes,
the Howard University.
The Mecca.
And we're going to talk about that later, but first I want to talk about what's going on right now in the news, especially coronavirus.
Yeah.
If you win, your administration is going to inherit a really dire situation. A key model is projecting deaths could reach 3,000 a day by December, in part because of declining vigilance of the public. So, as you know, President Trump has promised a coronavirus vaccine by the end of the year or maybe sooner. Would you trust that vaccine?
I think that we have learned since this pandemic started, but really before that, that there's very little that we can trust that comes out of Donald Trump's mouth. From the beginning of this pandemic, he has called it a hoax. He has muzzled the public health experts. He has minimized the seriousness of it. He has created false expectations for the American people and American families, even though if he had listened to the scientists and the experts, he would have understood the gravity of it and the power that he as President of the United States has to actually save lives. And none of those were his priorities. His priority was to do whatever he thought was politically expedient. And no, I would not trust his word. I would trust the word of public health experts and scientists, but not Donald Trump.
But do you trust that in the situation where we're in now, that the public health experts and the scientists will get the last word on the efficacy of a vaccine?
If past is prologue, that they will not. They'll be muzzled. They'll be suppressed. They will be sidelined because he's looking at an election coming up in less than 60 days, and he's grasping for whatever he can get to pretend that he has been a leader on this issue when he is not.
So let's just say there's a vaccine that is approved and even distributed before the election. Would you get it?
Well, I think that's going to be an issue for all of us. I will say that I would not trust Donald Trump, and it would have to be a credible source of information that talks about the efficacy and the reliability of whatever he's talking about. I will not take his word for it. He wants us to inject bleach. No, I will not take his word.
Dr. Fauci said a vaccine wouldn't be approved unless the American people had really assurances that it was safe and that he feels that it was safe and that if that happens, he would take it. Do you feel more comfortable hearing someone like Dr. Fauci say that?
No, I think Dr. Fauci has proven for anyone who has been watching him for years and years to put the public health of the American people as the highest priority in terms of his work and his reputation and his priority. Yes, I trust Dr. Fauci.
So let's look down the road. At some point, hopefully, there will be a credible and a safe vaccine for coronavirus. If and when that happens, should all 50 states require students to get that vaccine before entering public school?
Well, first, Dana, I would say that there's a huge distinction between creation of a vaccine and then peer-reviewed and to the point that it is actually viable. Big difference between vaccine and vaccinations.
Absolutely.
And one of the issues that I think is very critical on this point about whether people are actually vaccinated is whether there's a national plan. Joe Biden and I have a plan, a national plan. Donald Trump does not. And so when we start breaking down different populations, there has to be an overall plan that thinks about those who, and will administer vaccines to those who have been hardest hit, who are most vulnerable and most in need. And that's the kind of approach we need to have.
When you get to the point of vaccinations, would that plan include requirement for public schools to take the coronavirus vaccine?
I will listen to the public health experts and hear what they have to say.
Early on, the former Vice President, Joe Biden, appeared to support a federal mask mandate. And now he says he would put a lot of pressure on governors, on mayors, on local officials for them to issue the mandate. So can you clear this up? What exactly is the Biden-Harris stance on this? Would a Biden-Harris administration support a federal mask mandate?
So the Biden-Harris position on this is that leaders must lead. And one of the ways leaders lead is they set standards. And so what Joe has been very clear about in his personal behavior, much less in what he is admonishing and requesting of the American people, is that we all make the sacrifice to wear a mask in the interest of love of our neighbor, in the interest of defeating or at least reducing the health risks and the number of deaths in America. So it's about a national standard. Everyone should wear a mask. And here's the thing about this. None of us likes wearing a mask. Nobody likes to wear a mask.
But there's a difference between a standard.
But it's about sacrifice.
Right. There's a difference between a standard and a mandate. Would it be a federal mandate under the Biden-Harris administration?
It would be a standard. No, listen, this is not about, in terms of the priorities of Joe Biden and myself, this is not about punishment. It's not about Big Brother. It is simply about saying what a leader says in times of crisis. And this is, you look at World War II, you look at the Great Depression, where leaders said, we each have to sacrifice for the sake of the nation and the collective, and that's what this is about.
Right, and I get that, but how do you enforce a standard, especially when, as you know, there are governors who are who just don't agree with that, and they're not mandating it on the more local level? How do you enforce that?
But I think that part of the issue here is that we have a president of the United States who made this a partisan issue and made it a political issue, and he had governors who fell in line with him on his politics.
And you don't think it'll still be a partisan issue if you win?
I hope not. I pray not, because the COVID, the virus, could care less who you voted for in the last election or who you plan to vote for in the next election. And we need leadership that appreciates that on certain issues they should not be partisan, and wearing a mask certainly shouldn't be one of them.
I want to turn to Kenosha.
Okay.
You believe that the officer who shot Jacob Blake should be charged. You were the district attorney in San Francisco. I'm wondering if you put yourself in the position of the DA in Kenosha and how you would feel if you got pressure from the Democratic running mate to be Vice President of the United States to put criminal charges in without necessarily knowing the facts that the DA knows.
You're absolutely right, and that's why I've been very clear. I am not in full possession of the facts of the case, but based on what I've seen, I think that charges very much should be considered and should be considered in a very serious way, and that there should be accountability and consequence. But I think the bigger point here is also that we have to agree that we can't have a system that does not require accountability and consequence for everyone who breaks the rules or breaks the law. And that includes police officers. But everyone is entitled to due process, everyone, including police officers, and I encourage that, I support that. I think our democracy and our system of justice requires that.
The way I took what you said, I think it was last week, was much more forward-leaning,
No,
that they should be charged.
I think that based on what I saw, he should be charged. But I am not in full possession of the facts and the evidence, and I'm clearly not the prosecutor in the case. And the prosecutor in the case must make a decision based on all of the evidence and all of the laws that include giving everyone, and in particular those who might be charged, due process in the process.
I'm sure you've been following the story in Rochester, New York.
Yeah.
We've had another incident. 7 officers were suspended after the death of another black man, Daniel Prude. So should those officers be charged based on what you know? I'm
going to give the benefit of the doubt to the prosecutors who are involved in that case, and in particular, I know that the Attorney General the Attorney General of New York is reviewing the case, and I expect that they will review all of the evidence and make the appropriate decision.
Because this is where you come from,
yeah.
Law enforcement,
yes.
and top cop is where
yeah.
you come from. I want to ask about something that you wrote in a 2009 book,
okay.
Which is, if we take a show of hands of those who would like to see more police officers on the streets, mine would shoot up. And then in June of this year, you said to the New York Times, it is status quo thinking to believe that putting more police on the streets creates more safety. That's wrong. So my question for you now, in retrospect, looking at your time as DA and as Attorney General of California through the lens of 2020, did you help contribute to what you describe as a status quo thinking, that more police equals more safety?
I am very clear that we have got to, in America, reimagine how we are accomplishing public safety. And what I believe now and what I believed then remains true and consistent, which is, if you look at the communities that have no or very little police presence as compared to those who have a high degree of police presence, you will see stark differences. And one of them is this. If you go into any upper-class suburb in America, You will not see police presence, but what you will see are well-funded public schools, high rates of home ownership, small businesses that have access to capital. You'll see families who have jobs where they don't have to worry about getting to the end of the month and feeding their children. And so if we want to create safe communities, one of the smartest ways we can do that is invest in the health of those communities, because healthy communities are safe communities.
Would your hand still shoot up if somebody asked if you would want more police officers on your streets?
What I would say now is what I would say then, which is I want to make sure that if a woman is raped, a child is molested, or one human being murders another human being, that there will be a police officer that responds to that case, and that there will be accountability and consequence for the offender. Yes.